hopefully we get to his feet soon, because this is his big moment. But I think he's getting to his feet now.
The Conservatives, the party of privilege and the richest, versus the Labour Party. The Labour Party that's standing up for working people to improve the lives of all. It's the establishment versus the people. It's our historic duty to make sure the people prevail. And as Ian explained, a duty for all of us here today. The duty of every Labour MP, a duty of our 500,000 members, including, and I welcome them, the 2,500 who've joined in the last 24 hours. Much of the media and the establishment are saying this election is a foregone conclusion. They think there are rules in politics which, if you don't follow by doffing your cap to the powerful people, accepting that things can't really change, then you can't win. But of course, they do not want us to win, because when we win, it is the people, not the powerful, who win. The nurse, the teacher, the small trader, the carer, the builder, the office worker, the student, the carer win. We all win. It's the establishment that complains, I don't play by the rules, by which they mean their rules. We can't win, they say, when we don't play their game. We don't fit in their cosy club. We're not obsessed with the tittle-tattle of Westminster or Brussels. We don't accept that it is natural for Britain to be governed by a ruling elite, the city and the tax dodgers. We don't accept that the British people just have to take what they're given. At that, they don't deserve better. And in a sense, the establishment and their camp followers in the media are quite right. I don't play by their rules. And if a Labour government is elected on the 8th of June, we won't play by their rules either. They are yesterday's rules set by failed political and corporate elites. We should be consigning to the past. It is these rules that have allowed a cosy cartel to rig the system in favour of a few powerful and wealthy individuals and corporations. It's a rigged system set up by the wealth extractors for the wealth extractors. But things can, and they will, change. Britain needs a Labour government that is prepared to fight for people in every part of the country, our towns, villages, as well as big cities. A Labour government that isn't scared to take on the cosy cartels that are hoarding this country's wealth for themselves. It needs a government that will use that wealth to invest in people's lives in every community, to build a better future for every person who lives here. Because the Conservatives, drunk on a failed ideology, are hell-bent on cutting every public service they can get their hands on. And they will use all the divide and rule tactics of the Linton Crosby trade to keep their rigged system intact. Don't be angry at the privateers profiting from our public services, they whisper. Be angry instead at the migrant worker just trying to make a better life. Don't be angry at government ministers running down our schools and hospitals, they tell us. Be angry instead at the disabled woman or the unemployed man. It's the rigged economy the Tories are protecting that Labour is committed to challenging. We will not let the elite extract wealth from the pockets of ordinary working people any longer. So many people in modern Britain do what seems they like the right thing to do. They get jobs. They spend all day working hard. They save to buy their own home. They raise children. They look after elderly or sick relatives. And yet, at the end of it, they get almost nothing left over as a reward. Compare their lives with the multinational corporations and the gilded elite who hide their money in the Cayman Islands because the Conservatives are too morally bankrupt to take them on and collect the taxes. Labour will end this racket and make sure that everyone pays their taxes which fund our public services. We will overturn the rigged system. For all Theresa May's warm words on the steps of Downing Street, the Conservatives will never do any such thing. 7 years of broken promises show us that. On pay, frozen, the deficit, the NHS, our schools, our environment. It was their wealthy friends in the city who crashed our economy. How dare they ruin the economy with their recklessness and greed and then punish those who had nothing to do with it. It was not pensioners, nurses, the lower average paid workers or carers who crashed the economy. We know who did that. The Conservatives boast of record numbers of jobs. But what good is it if people are working and getting poorer and don't share in the profits of that economy, while the Conservatives look after the wealthy few? Our offer is to tackle elderly poverty and loneliness, invest in our economy, National Health Service and schools, to improve rights at work and a £10 living wage for all workers. Britain is the 6th richest economy in the world, and the people of Britain must share in that wealth. If I were Southern Rail, or if I were Philip Green, I'd be worried about a Labour government. I really would. If I were Mike Ashley, or the CEO of a tax-avoiding multinational corporation, I'd want to see a Tory victory. I really would. Why? Because those are the people who are monopolising the wealth that should be shared by each and every one of us in the whole country. Everyone, and I mean everyone, has a contribution to make and a life to lead. Poverty and homelessness are a disaster for the individual, but they're also a loss for all of us, of that talent and that ambition that isn't fulfilled because of the poverty and deprivation in which people are living. It is wealth that should belong to the majority and not a tiny minority. Labour is the party that will put the interests of the majority first, while the Tories only really care about those who already have so much. That is why we will prove the establishment experts wrong and change the direction of this election. Because the British people know that they are the true wealth creators, held back by a system rigged for the wealth extractors. Theresa May will insist that this is an election about Brexit. She will try to downplay the issues that affect people's lives every day, and instead turn the election into an ego trip about her own failing leadership and the machinations of the coming negotiations in Brussels. It is only Labour that will focus on what kind of country we want to have after Brexit. In the coming weeks, Labour will lay out our policies to unlock opportunities for every single person in this country. We will focus on giving people real control over their own lives and make sure that everyone reaps a just reward for the work they do. We will no longer allow those at the top to leech off those who bust their guts on 0 hours contracts, or those forced to make sacrifices to pay their mortgage or to pay their rent. Instead of the country's wealth being hidden in tax havens, we will put it in the hands of the people of Britain, as they're the ones who earned it. In this election, Labour will lead the movement to make that change. We will build a new economy worthy of the 21st century, and we'll build a country for the many, not the few.
Thank you very much. Laura Koonsberg, BBC News. Mr Corbyn, what is it that you hope to show to voters in the next 7 weeks, beyond this room, that they haven't seen in the last 2 years since you've been the party leader?
Libby Vina, ITV News. Mr Corbyn, you say that you want to speak for the many, not the few, but your poll ratings of something like 14 or 15% suggest that only a very few people believe you, and you've attacked the elite. Aren't you effectively just part of an Islington elite that doesn't reflect the views of people around the country?
It's all right, he can handle it. Okay, in fairness, I'm going to take a man with a tie.
I think that's my break. Thank you. Andy Bell, Channel 5 News. Mr Corbyn, do you anticipate raising taxes for some people? I'm not talking about cracking down on tax evasion, but actually some people having to pay more taxes, not just the wealthy tax avoiders. And could you say at what point you think that would kick in? Who do you think is wealthy enough to pay some more tax in this country?
Great, thank you very much. Over to the leader.
Laura, thanks very much for your question. And thank you for the other questions as well. This is an opportunity in an election to get our message out of hope and opportunity for people all around the country. To get a message out that there doesn't have to be people homeless. You don't have to be waiting forever for a hospital appointment or an operation, and you do have some chance of security when you get older. And so our policies will reach out to deal with the issues of social injustice and inequality within our society. And in that reaching out, we will include a lot of people. We've set out some of our policies in the last 10 days about the minimum wage, about the way in which small businesses are so badly treated by very big business and how they deserve to be better treated. We've set out our policies on carers' allowances. We've set out a policy to make sure that every child gets a free school meal every day, that they all eat together. So they grow up together, eating together, learning together. That's the basis of a strong community and a strong society. Our message is one of inclusion and social justice, and we're going to get that message out across the whole country. And I'm very confident of that. We started the campaign on the streets yesterday in Croydon. We'll be travelling the length and breadth of this country to get that message across. And our plans will be fully costed and will be all accounted for to be paid for when the manifesto is published. The plans we've set out so far are already costed, and yes, at the very top end, the very, very top end, we won't be cutting corporation tax, which is what this Tory government is doing. We won't be handing £70 billion back to the biggest businesses and corporations and the very wealthiest people in this country. This government has got us more into debt than all of the other Labour governments combined in British history in order to cut services and give tax giveaways at the top end. Our priorities are absolutely the other way round. And as to your very helpful question about the elites, I am very proud to represent Islington North in Parliament. And it's absolutely true, there are people in Islington who buy and drink cappuccino every day. It's absolutely true. I know many of them. But it's also true that 40% of our children are living in poverty. It's also true there are people sleeping on the streets of our borough, as there are all over this country. So don't run away with this idea that everyone who lives in London is living the life of Riley and it's very wealthy. It's not the case. House prices are driving many people out. I want a government that deals with the housing crisis for the whole country. I want a government that deals with employment issues for the whole country. So, in former mining communities that have had no investment, have high levels of unemployment, have high levels of deprivation, I want a Labour government and a National Investment Bank to invest in those communities and bring hope and opportunities for those people just as much as I want to conquer homelessness on the streets of London, Birmingham or Manchester. It's the whole country we're talking about. You very helpfully mentioned the opinion polls, and I'm really grateful to you for that. It was really kind of you, and I'm really pleased about that. All I can say is, in 2015, almost exactly 2 years ago, I was given 200 to 1 as an outside chance.
I think that's what my young people in Brent would call a mic drop. And isn't it great we've got a politician who actually answers the questions? Can you imagine just how effective Prime Minister's questions would be if Jeremy was actually there answering the questions? Anyway, I'll take a few more.
Paul Wall from the Huffington Post.
Hi, Paul.
Mr. Corbyn, can you tell us, you talk about the rigged system today. In your opinion, how are you going to precisely change the rigged system? And was New Labour part of that rigged system, in your opinion?
Thanks to Mara Cohen from Sky News. Mr Corbyn, we're about to go to the polls nationally for the third time in 3 years. We're hearing reports today that some in your party want you to call for a second referendum on the deal we strike with the EU after we leave. Is that right? Are you considering it, or do you want to rule it out?
Thank you for the compliment on my fashion. See about the question.
Very lovely.
Martha Carney from BBC World at One. You were described earlier as the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Judging by these opinion polls, again, I'm afraid a lot of people have questions to ask you about that. You've outlined a number of policies recently. Do you ever worry that Labour, the policies themselves may be popular, but Labour under you has become a tainted brand?
Oh, you've got such a lovely top on as well. Okay, back over to you, Jeremy.
Okay. Thanks, Dawn. Yeah, Paul, the way the system is rigged goes something like this. Multinational corporations play around with pricing systems in order to earn money in one country and pay lower tax in another. They play around with taxation systems by creaming off profits and putting them into tax havens, which are then not bothered to chase down. And we have a government that's far too ready to negotiate with very big companies about the level of tax they should pay. Now look, I'm sure you pay all your tax. I know you do, because you're that kind of chap. But you don't call up the HMRC and say, well, look, let's cut a deal on this. You think I owe 10,000, I think I owe 5, give you 7.5. That'd be all right. It doesn't work like that for ordinary people, and it never should. And it shouldn't work like that at the top end either. And so John McDonnell, who's here in the audience, announced a couple of days ago that we would want the full tax returns of all medium and larger corporations to be published so everybody can see what is going on. And I think that will help help to open up that system, and we will then have a much fairer system. Because if you think about it, low paid and unpaid tax of very big corporations falls on who? It falls on small businesses that cannot evade it, who have to pay it because they're small and have no opportunity to otherwise. It falls on everybody else, or it falls on public sector workers who lose their jobs because there isn't enough money to pay for those services. It is shortchanging our schools, our hospitals and our housing budget if big business doesn't pay the tax they should. John McDonnell will chase it down. There are elections coming up on June the 8th. There's also the mayoral elections and the county council elections coming up on May the 4th. We are a large party. We're campaigning all over the country, in every part, and we're putting forward policies of what will be a more socially just, more cohesive society in this country. The European Union negotiations are going on, and we've set out our lines on negotiation. Primarily, it is about gaining and retaining tariff-free access to the European market. We haven't threatened to turn Britain into an offshore tax haven on the shores of Europe to undermine every European economy. We've instead said we want to work with them to have an agreed process by which we continue to trade with Europe. Because walking away and trading under World Trade Organization conditions will mean that manufacturing industry in this country would be severely damaged. Every manufacturing enterprise in this country relies on imported materials from Europe or sales to Europe. And in some cases, in complicated productions, the parts cross the channel several times as they're being fabricated in the aircraft industry and others. It is an integrated and complicated production process. The idea that you can simply approach these negotiations by threatening to set up a tax haven and hell take the hindmost to the rest of the people is simply not a sensible way of negotiating. So I have reached out to socialist colleagues all across Europe ever since I became the leader of the party, and I invited them all to come to London in February for a discussion about our approach and what relationships we want with them in the future. And those lines of negotiation will be the ones that we as a Labour government will negotiate with Europe on. We want to work with Europe. We accept the result of the referendum, but there still has to be an economic relationship with Europe. And we're not going to tear up the workers' rights agenda, the environmental protection agenda, or any human rights agenda. The idea that Labour is somehow or other, as you so kindly describe it, a tainted brand. Well, there are people in the audience that are wearing badges of Keir Hardie. He was vilified beyond belief when he was elected as the first ever Labour MP. They said, how can a working man go to Parliament and represent people? Anyone who stands up to create a better, fairer, more decent society gets vilified. Our party gets vilified. But I tell you what, we're bigger than we've ever been, we're stronger than we've ever been, and we're more determined than we've ever been.
We're now out of time. I know, but isn't it great to end on a standing ovation? Woo, woo. So, there's one undisputed fact. June always marks the end of May. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.